that's not who I was. So that internal dissonance kept on presenting itself. The external dissonance also eventually started presenting because, I think the recognition that I was getting at that time, in spite of managing complex programs and so on, wasn't as much as I would have expected. And I was frustrated about that. I was venting about that to a friend on how they don't recognize execution and how it is important. And I remember he giving me a cold stare and saying, "Hey, Prasad, let me tell you some fun thing. People pay basically for thought leadership, and the world doesn't pay as much for just execution, right? So where is your thought leadership?" And that statement was almost like I could have rationalized that because program management also has a lot of thought leadership to land programs on the on the right time, under budget, and so on. But that statement was like somebody throwing a glass of cold water on my face. And I made the choice at that time. I went and told my manager at that time that this is the last program that I'm managing. It was still 6 months away from its fruition. He was a little bit shocked, but to his credit, and I consider him a friend now, I still meet him. He allowed me to do that. And I got into a role at the end of that that basically had no execution component and only thought leadership component. My thinking was, my brand at that time in Adobe was, oh, this guy manages big programs, probably not a lot of thought leadership, but execution is wonderful. So I said, you know what, let me just transform that. And I as part of that role, I got myself into one of the pricing strategy program that VP of FP&A at that time was running. And we found so many things that were broken about Adobe's pricing at that time. And that got visibility all the way to the CEO and CEO staff level. And that eventually changed my internal brand in Adobe completely. And so, subsequent to that, when Adobe started moving into cloud subscriptions business, the need for analytics sort of came up. And I had this background, but within Adobe, that was a very well kept secret. So I just decided to sign up for that. And then, like, I remember telling my eventually boss at that time, the VP of the group, that I want to do that because that I can execute, I have a thought leadership. If I do both in that, then that's what takes people to director. And I still remember when I told her that, her body language, like it was a conversation in one of the Fridays in Adobe San Francisco office. And you could see that little bit of a cringe, right? Like, what does this guy think? And, what of himself. But believe it or not, like literally 3 years or less from that point, she was the one who promoted me to director. And my point there is like being mindful about like who you are, what drives you, what you're passionate about, what your strengths are, very well aware of what weaknesses are. And of course, taking that feedback that my friend gave, not defensively, but like something to think deeply about, really helped me in that case in navigating my career back to area where, back to the three center of those three concentric circles that I mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important. You kind of took what somebody had shared with you and really kind of looked deeply and said, how do I take this information and do something about it? Because I also find sometime, and it goes back to the point you were making about transitions in tech, right?